Hey, good morning. Welcome to another study in God's Word. This is the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. This is episode number 12 of our study in the book of Genesis. Today we have reached into the story of Noah, the beginning of the story of Noah. We're going to look at verses 1 through 8. We're going to see what was going on with the world at the time of Noah and why God would bring destruction upon the world. So let's jump into this study today. And we're going to start with these words. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, all whom they chose. So what is going on here? This has been a controversial and a confusing passage that has been given, and there's a lot of theories about what was going on here, and I'll share a couple of theories with you here today on what this verse actually means. Something was happening that would make God mad enough in order to destroy and wipe out all of the earth's population, with the exception of just a handful of people. So there was something that was going on that made God extremely mad. So this thing that was going on was that there was this multiplication on earth between the daughters born to these sons of God and the daughters of man. So what is that a reference to? Well, during this time, there would be a rapid expansion of population. Now remember, just to remind ourselves of what we have been covering, is that from the time of creation all the way until the time of Noah was a period of 1,000 years. Now think about even in our lifetimes. In 1,000 years, what has the population growth been? What has the technological growth been? And it just goes to pass that there would be much of that same thing, that there would be a population growth that would have exploded from the time of creation until Noah. And we can also make the assumption that there was probably a great technological advancement during that time. Now, we don't know to what extent that was. I think that's one of the things that we're going to learn later. But we do know that over 1,000-year time, that they weren't just going to be cave dwellers during that time, that there would be rapid growth in technology, in abilities. You know, there could have been some creations that would have happened, or inventions that could have happened in that time that we wouldn't even fathom because we are so far removed of it, and the evidence of all of that would have been covered by the flood. So we really don't know, but we do know that in that 1,000 years of time that there was great population expansion. And not only that, remember the long lifespans of people that were pre-flood, that would have also contributed to a rapid expansion. This population growth would have been an immense growth. It could have been really a worldwide kind of growth that we are not able to understand and see because we don't have any of the records for it. So just, you know, you can let your mind think about those things, but we really don't have any evidences that we can look at, or we don't have any records that we can look at. It'll be very interesting in heaven to know what those things were. We do know that there was a problem, though, and the problem that is laid out here was the ungodly intermarriage between two groups. And the two groups of these ungodly intermarriage were called the sons of God, and it was called also the daughters of men. Now, what are these two groups? Well, there have been different, like I said, different theories. Many have believed that the sons of God are those who came from the line of Seth. Others believe that the daughters of men were from the line of Cain, and this describes an intermarriage between godly and ungodly, something God specifically prohibits, by the way, in Deuteronomy 7 and 2 Corinthians chapter 6. But just by going on that theory, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Why would that then have made God angry enough to wipe out, again, almost all of the earth's population, except for just a handful of people? And it also talks about that there were, in those days, that there were believers marrying unbelievers. That whole idea doesn't really fit the context of what is being said here. Now, more accurately, most likely it was that the sons of God were either demons or angels in rebellion against God, which is what a demon is, or they were uniquely demon-possessed men, and the daughters of men as human women. So that's where the phrases come from. This idea of sons of God meaning a most most scholars kind of come to this conclusion that this would be a fallen angel marrying a human woman. And this would have become this unholy union, this ungodly union that would have made God mad enough to wipe out the earth. Now, where do we get that idea? Well, the phrase, the sons of God, clearly refers to angelic creatures when it's used other times in the Old Testament. And again, what I've said to you before is you use the Bible to translate the Bible. You use the Bible to understand the Bible. So as you look at one verse, you can look at where it's used in other contexts, and you can get an idea of what the real meaning is behind the verse that you're reading or the words that you're reading. Sons of God was used in Job chapter 1 verse 6, and it says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them." Now that is a reference to the fallen angels, the demonic presence. They came to present themselves before God. Satan was among them because that's who he was. He was a fallen angel. He would have been that leader, but he was a fallen angel. Satan is not God. He does not have God's qualities or nature. He doesn't have God's equivalent powers. He was part of the sons of God who came to present themselves before the Lord. Chapter 2, verse 1 of Job. "And again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord." So he was part of the fallen angels who came to present themselves before God. Chapter 38, verse 7 of Job. "When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy." Now this time it's a reference of angels who walk with God, who follow God. So it's a pretty clear idea that the sons of God would be part of fallen angels that were somehow having a relationship with human women, marrying these human women. Jude, the book of Jude in the New Testament, chapter 6, tells us that the angels who did not keep their proper domain but left their habitation. So it's again referring to that. Jude 7 goes on to tell us that they sinned in a similar manner to these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh. So this is the picture, that they have the ability to engage in the fallen mankind immorality and in these sexual types of sins. So angels apparently can do this according to what the Bible tells us in the book of Job and in the book of Jude. So we don't really know what this union was like. We don't know how all of this union worked, but we do know that there was some immorality, some corruption that was happening between angels who were fallen and human women. Now, really, it does no good to speculate on any of this union or any of what happened here, because we really just don't know. It's just the best guess that we have. But we do know that there's a lot of occultic practices that are filled with sexual associations with the demonic, and they're very active still to this day. And so this is what is being referred to. Jude 6 also makes it clear what God did with these wicked angels. It says in Jude 6 that they are reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Why? Because they did not keep their proper place. They did not keep their proper role. Their sinful pursuit of freedom has put them into bondage. They did not fulfill what God told them to fulfill. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 19 through 20 tells us that Jesus went to these disobedient spirits in their prison and proclaimed his victory over them on the cross. And so these are the pictures of what is going on, that there was some type of relationship that happened, and they chose for themselves wives that they wanted. They took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. So we can picture that this is probably what is going on, and it is something that made God angry enough that he was willing to wipe out humanity because of this. Well, let's go into verses 3 and 4, and let's look at God's response to this great wickedness that was happening in the world at that time. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Now I want you just to stop right there. When it says, and his days shall be 120 years, that was not a reference to how long people will live. That was not a reference to the lifespan of people. What that was a reference to was from the time God spoke that, it will be now 120 years until the flood happens. Many people wonder if the people of the flood era knew ahead of time how long it was going to be. And the answer is they would have known. If they would have listened to Noah, they would have known. Noah knew. Noah knew that after God's announcement that there would be 120 years. Noah would know then 50 years before the event. He knew 20 years before the event. He knew 5 years before the event. He knew 1 year before the event. He knew 1 month before the event. He knew 1 week before the event. He was continuously, most likely, trying to share with people or trying to convince people of what was going to happen, but they refused to listen to him. So his days shall be 120 was not a reference to the lifespan of people. It was more a reference to this is the time until the judgment is going to occur. Now, when the book of Matthew, when Jesus is talking about and giving the example of Noah and the time of Noah, the people of Noah's time knew if they would have paid attention to when it was going to happen. The same way that we can have an idea, a general idea of when the end times are going to occur because we can look at the countdown clocks that God has given us. He's given us the examples and the models that we can follow so we can have a pretty good idea. We may not be able to pinpoint it to the day. We may not be able to pinpoint it to the week or even the month, but we can have a pretty good idea when we start seeing all of the signs and the events that really take place in the book of Matthew, the things that Luke adds in, the things that Revelation has, the things that 1st and 2nd Thessalonians have, the book of Daniel, the book of Ezekiel, Jeremiah, some of those writings, some of the Psalms. When you put all of the evidence together, you can have a pretty good idea that it's going to happen in a certain amount of time. The evidence is there, the same way it was for Noah. Noah knew 120 years before it was going to happen. He knew 100 years. He knew 50 years. He knew it down to the final year because God had said it will be 120 years. 120 years, that's when the flood would come. So he's going to talk about in that day, he says that this is what was going on. So not only were the sons of God and the daughters of men marrying, there were also giants on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God, now again, who was the reference to the sons of God? That's most likely just based upon Scripture, interpreting Scripture. That would have been the picture of the fallen angels. Angels who rebelled against God, who turned their backs on God, who rebelled with Satan. They were the sons of God. So there were giants on the earth in those days, also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, had relationship with the daughter of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So who were these mighty men? Well, these were these giants that came about taking place between the immoral, unhealthy, unrighteous relationship that was going on between a fallen angel and a human woman, and it was producing these giants, these people of unusual size on the earth before and even after the flood. We have examples of this after the flood, but it could have possibly been demonic elements in their lineage that are giving birth to these mighty men of old, these renowned, these giants that are coming about in those days. Verses 5 through 8. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This really says a lot. It means that there was no aspect of man's nature that was not corrupted by sin. They were corrupted in an intense way. Every intent of the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. Wickedness of man was great in the earth. And so the sin nature that began in Adam and Eve and would pass down from generation to generation, that same sin nature had so corrupted them that there was absolutely nothing that was good about them. There was a quote that was said about this scene, and the quote was this: "A more emphatic statement of the wickedness of the human heart is hardly conceivable." It was awful. It was bad. Jesus said, "As in the days of Noah, so will also be the coming of the Son of Man." In other words, the conditions of when the Lord will return will be just like the conditions that were taking place before the flood. So think with me about what those conditions could possibly be. Well, we had the condition of exploding. Let me write these out. We had exploding population. That was one of the conditions that we saw. We had sexual perversion. That was happening between the daughters of men. Perversion. That was happening between the daughters of men and the sons of God, the fallen angels. We also saw demonic activity. That was going on because demons were active. We saw the constant evil in the heart of man. And we had widespread corruption and violence. These were the conditions that were going on as the flood, as the precursor to the flood. And so when Jesus said, "So as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man," meaning that these same things. So in our world, do we see exploding population? Yeah. Do we see sexual perversion? Are there sexually perverted acts that are being promoted, that are being used, that are being applauded, that are being pushed in every form and in every narrative? Yes, there is all of those kind of things that are happening all around us today. There is sexual perversion everywhere we look. Our own communities are overwhelmed with the sexual perversion that is happening. The stories that I hear from people that I know about things that they're seeing and they're witnessing, the things that even Christians are supporting, are a form of sexual perversion. Is there demonic activity? Yes. There is demonic activity everywhere around the world. People have turned their hearts toward God. There is constant evil in the heart of mankind in these days, and we have widespread corruption and violence taking place everywhere we look. Just turn on the TV today and you will see examples of the widespread corruption. Political corruption, social corruption, economic corruption, relational corruption, institutions that have been corrupted. Even the hearts of man have been corrupted, and there is violence. There is an anger and a hatred in the hearts of man. And Jesus said, "When I return, it will be in a time that the same things that were happening in the time of Noah will be happening in your society, in your generation." And that is happening all around us today. Well, let's go on. It says this. It says, "And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart." God had a sorrow at man, and the grief of God's heart is it's a striking statement that God makes. This, by the way, does not mean that his creation was out of control, nor does it mean that God hoped for something better but was unable to achieve it. This is not God's doing. God knew all along that this is how things would turn out, but our text clearly says that God sees his plan for the ages before us. He sees it all unfolding, and it affects him. God is not unfeeling. In the face of human sin and rebellion, it breaks God's heart. And the more we become aware of how much it breaks God's heart, the more we don't want to sin because we don't want to break his heart. So the Lord said, because of this, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. So what's going to happen? Well, mankind, animals, his creation is going to pay the price for the wickedness and the sin that happened in that time. But there is one line of good news, and that's the final line that we are going to read today. But, that's a big but statement. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah didn't earn grace. Noah found grace. No one earns grace. No one could possibly earn grace. You cannot earn God's favor, but we all can find grace. Grace can never possibly be earned. You can't go to the store and purchase it. You can't do enough good deeds to try to accomplish it. Grace is the unmerited gift. It is the kind-hearted gift of a compassionate God. We see up here when God says that he was sorry that he had made. He was grieved in his heart. He was sorry that he had made man. That compassionate God also pours out this miraculous thing we call grace. Noah, in the midst of all of this perversion, in all of this exploding population, in all of this demonic activity, in all of the evil in the hearts of man, in all of the widespread corruption and violence, Noah still found grace. He didn't earn grace. He found it. Romans 5:20 is an interesting verse when it's dealing with this, and it says this. It says, but where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. In a society where sin has affected it all, corrupted it all, when the hearts of mankind is evil, when the sexual perversion has exploded, when population has exploded, when there's widespread corruption and violence, when it seems like the demonic activity has taken over and affected every institution of the world, there is still a moment in time where you can find grace, where you can find the unmerited forgiveness, the unmerited kindness, the love and compassion of a loving and holy God. In the midst of that, God reaches down to man and says, I still love you and I'm willing to save you if you will turn your heart to me. In the midst of that corruption and that perversion, Noah found the grace of God. And we can find the grace of God too. No matter what you have done, no matter how far you have fallen, no matter what amount of sin has taken hold of your life, no matter what perversions have been there, no matter what corruption and violence and what the thoughts of your heart have been, no matter what wrong you have done, if you come to God and you say to him, I am so sorry, could you please forgive me? I want to trust in Jesus as my Lord and Savior. When you do that, you will find the same grace that Noah found in a corrupt and evil world. The grace that would carry him safely through to the other side. That's the kind of grace that we have available to us today. It's the kind of grace that we can find. We can never earn it. We can never do enough. But we can find that grace when we surrender our hearts to him. I hope that you have made that decision, that you have surrendered your heart to the Lord, and you have found his favor, and you have found his grace. Next time, we'll look and see at the story of the building of the ark and the destruction that comes on the world as we pick it up in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, starting in verse 9. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day in the Lord, and I hope that you have found, truly found, the grace of God in your life. See you next time.